Have you ever had that frustrating moment when you realize the biggest thing standing between you and the life you want is you? Maybe it's that nagging inner voice telling you you're not good enough, or the habits that keep pulling you back instead of pushing you forward. If any of that sounds familiar, then you're not alone. We all wrestle with self-doubt, fear of failure, and those excuses we convince ourselves are valid. The good news? You don't have to stay stuck in that loop. Today, we're diving into Get Out of Your Own Way by Dave Hollis. This is one of those books that doesn't just nudge you toward change, it gives you the tools to make it happen. And no, it's not about being perfect or pretending that life isn't messy. It's about owning your flaws, working through them, and realizing that sometimes the person you need to challenge the most is the one staring back at you in the mirror. If this is your first time here, welcome. On this channel, we break down the most impactful books out there, giving you the highlights, the lessons, and the motivation to apply them to your life. So, if you enjoy this kind of content, make sure to like the video, hit subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Your engagement helps the channel grow and, more importantly, connects us as a community of lifelong learners. So, let me ask you, how often do we let fear or insecurity dictate our choices? Think about all the times you've held back from speaking up, pursuing a dream, or even just trying something new because you thought, what if I fail? Dave Hollis understands that struggle all too well. In fact, he's built this book on his own journey of learning to confront those limiting beliefs and rewrite the stories we tell ourselves. The beauty of this book is its honesty. Hollis doesn't sugarcoat his experiences or act like he's got everything figured out. He opens up about his mistakes, his insecurities, and the moments when he felt completely lost. But more importantly, he shares how he turned those experiences into stepping stones for growth. It's like sitting down with a friend who's been through the ringer but came out the other side stronger, and wants the same for you. It's about small, consistent steps that move you in the right direction. It's about choosing courage over comfort and growth over stagnation. And yes, it's messy and uncomfortable at times, but that's where the real magic happens. So, whether you're here because you're feeling stuck, looking for inspiration, or just curious about how this book can make a difference in your life, stick around. We're about to dive into the key lessons from Get Out of Your Own Way, and trust me, there's plenty to unpack, practical advice, honest reflections, and a lot of encouragement to help you step into your potential. Ready to explore what's possible when you stop letting excuses run the show? Let's get started. Imagine for a moment that you're at work, trying your best to keep up with your tasks, hit deadlines, and maybe even make a good impression. Yet, despite all your efforts, there's this nagging feeling, like you're running in circles, or worse, like you're sabotaging yourself. It's frustrating, isn't it? Well, that's exactly what Mark Goulston addresses in Get Out of Your Own Way at Work. This book isn't just about improving your performance at work. It's about recognizing how we hold ourselves back and learning to stop the cycle of self-defeat. It's honest, raw, and refreshingly practical. Goulston begins by driving home a powerful truth. Self-defeating behaviors are learned. These patterns often trace back to childhood experiences, unresolved fears, and emotional scars. We carry them into our adult lives and, without realizing it, let them dictate our reactions, choices, and behaviors at work. What struck me right away was how relatable this is. Think about it. How often do we let fear, insecurity, or pride cloud our judgment? It's not something we do intentionally, but the impact is real. One of the most common ways we sabotage ourselves, Goulston explains, is through procrastination. And let's face it, we've all been there. Whether it's putting off a tough conversation, delaying a project, or simply ignoring a task we dread, procrastination feels like a momentary relief but often leads to bigger problems down the line. Goulston illustrates this with George's story, a tech editor who habitually waited until the last minute to write his articles. George's procrastination didn't just stress him out, it disrupted his team and cost his company money. What really hit home for me was how Goulston described the psychology behind procrastination. It's not just about being lazy. It's often about fear of failure, fear of criticism, or fear of not meeting expectations. This part of the book reminded me of a time I delayed sending an important email. I told myself I was waiting for the right moment, but the truth was I was afraid of the response. When I finally hit send, the issue resolved itself so quickly that I laughed at how much time I'd wasted. Goulston's advice on overcoming procrastination is simple but effective. Break tasks into smaller steps. enlist accountability partners, and focus on progress rather than perfection. Another self-defeating behavior Goulston explores is defensiveness, and wow, did this one make me reflect. When someone criticizes us, it's natural to feel attacked, but that knee-jerk reaction can do more harm than good. Goulston shares the story of two executives locked in a bitter argument. When he asked them if they thought the other was trying to say, "I'm right and you're wrong," both were surprised to realize they'd misunderstood each other's intentions. This moment of clarity helped them move past their defensiveness and actually resolve their conflict. Reading this reminded me of a heated disagreement I once had with a coworker. At the time, I was so focused on proving my point that I completely missed what they were trying to say. Looking back, I realize how much time and energy could have been saved if I'd just paused to listen instead of reacting defensively. Goulston suggests a powerful technique for diffusing defensiveness: ask questions instead of making assumptions. It's such a simple shift, but it can completely change the tone of a conversation. One of the book's most compelling stories is about John, an accountant who lost his job because he refused to adapt to new software. John's resistance wasn't about laziness or incompetence. It was rooted in fear. He convinced himself that he couldn't learn the new system, and instead of asking for help, he dug his heels in. This story resonated with me because it's such a common scenario. How often do we resist change, not because it's impossible, but because it feels overwhelming? But he also acknowledges the deeper emotions driving their behavior. This balance of accountability and understanding makes his advice feel both actionable and compassionate. A theme that runs throughout this section is the importance of self-awareness. Goulston encourages readers to examine their habits, ask themselves tough questions, and confront the patterns that hold them back. It's not easy work, but it's necessary. One line that stood out to me was, "Earning self-esteem is your job." It's a reminder that while external validation feels good, true confidence comes from within. I also appreciated how Goulston addresses the role of childhood experiences in shaping our workplace behavior. He explains that the workplace often mirrors the dynamics of a family, with bosses acting as parental figures and colleagues as siblings. This made me think about how unresolved issues from our past can resurface in surprising ways. For instance, someone who grew up feeling unheard might overcompensate by dominating conversations at work, while someone who felt criticized might become overly defensive. What I liked most about this section of the book is its practicality. Goulston doesn't just describe these behaviors, he offers concrete steps to address them. For example, to combat procrastination, he suggests creating a buddy system where you and a colleague hold each other accountable. To overcome defensiveness, he recommends practicing active listening and seeking clarity before reacting. These aren't groundbreaking ideas, but they're easy to implement and incredibly effective. What surprised me was how much this book made me reflect on my own behavior. I found myself thinking about moments when I'd procrastinated out of fear, reacted defensively when I felt criticized, or resisted change because it felt too daunting. Goulston's insights not only helped me understand these patterns, but also gave me the tools to start changing them. One perspective that shifted for me while reading was how I view failure. Goulston frames it as a natural part of growth, emphasizing that it's not about avoiding mistakes but about learning from them. This reminded me of something a mentor once told me: failing doesn't make you a failure. Not trying does. It's a mindset I've tried to embrace, but this book reinforced it in a way that felt deeply personal. Overall, the first part of Get Out of Your Own Way at Work sets the stage for a transformative journey. It's not about blaming ourselves for our flaws, but about taking ownership of our growth. Goulston's blend of storytelling, practical advice, and psychological insights makes the content relatable and actionable. As I read, I couldn't help but feel a sense of hope. Yes, we all have self-defeating behaviors, but with awareness and effort, we can overcome them. This section left me eager to dive deeper into the book and uncover more ways to get out of my own way. As we continue with Get Out of Your Own Way at Work, Mark Goulston moves into some of the most relatable and challenging self-defeating behaviors we encounter in our careers. These aren't just the habits we fall into. They're the ones that subtly, and sometimes not so subtly, derail our progress and rob us of satisfaction at work. What stood out to me in this section was how universal these issues are. It's almost comforting to know that so many of us struggle with the same things, and that there's hope for change. One behavior Goulston tackles early in this section is staying too long in a job that no longer serves you. This hit close to home for me because I think we've all been there, sticking with something because it feels safe, or because the idea of starting over seems overwhelming. Golston shares the story of people who dread Mondays, clock watch through their days, and feel drained by the sheer thought of their work. It's not just unhappiness, it's a kind of inertia that keeps you stuck. What I appreciated about his approach here is how he blends practicality with a sense of urgency. He's clear. Staying in a job that's not right for you doesn't just hurt your career, it affects your self-esteem and limits your potential. But he doesn't just say quit. Instead, he encourages readers to ask tough questions. If I could start over, would I choose this path again? If not, what's stopping me from making a change? These questions aren't easy to answer, but they're necessary. I was particularly struck by his suggestion to imagine you've already achieved financial freedom and then envision what you'd do with your life. This exercise, he says, can reveal your true passions and help you take small steps toward them, even before you leave your current role. It's a reminder that we don't have to overhaul our lives overnight. We can make gradual changes that align us with the future we want. Another chapter that resonated with me was about taking the bait. How often do we let someone else's words or actions pull us into unnecessary conflict? Golston shares a powerful story about Colin Powell, who was once baited with an inappropriate question about his wife's mental health. Instead of reacting defensively or angrily, Powell responded with grace and dignity, turning the moment into one of strength rather than weakness. This story reminded me of a time I let someone's offhand comment ruin my day. Looking back, I realized I had a choice. I could have let it slide or addressed it calmly, but instead, I allowed it to consume me. Golston's advice is simple yet profound. When baited, pause. Think about whether engaging is worth it. Often, the best response is none at all, or one that redirects the focus to what truly matters. Golston also dives into the habit of not delegating, and this one made me think about how often we equate doing everything ourselves with being competent or valuable. He shares the story of Julia, a project manager who took on so much work that she ended up drowning in it, alienating her colleagues in the process. Her inability to let go wasn't about laziness or incompetence, it was about trust. This chapter hit home because it made me realize how often we cling to tasks out of fear that someone else won't do them as well as we would. But Golston flips this mindset on its head, showing how delegation isn't about giving up control. It's about empowering others while freeing yourself to focus on what really matters. His advice to use the see one, do one, teach one method for delegation is brilliant in its simplicity. It's a step-by-step process that builds confidence for both parties. One of the more challenging topics in this section is learning to avoid talking over or at others. Golston describes people who dominate conversations as insecure and attention-seeking, often without realizing it. I found myself wincing a bit here because, let's be honest, we've all been guilty of this at some point, getting so caught up in what we want to say that we forget to listen. What I loved about this chapter was how it reframed communication as a two-way street. Golston emphasizes the importance of dialogue, where both parties feel heard and respected. He shares the story of David, a colleague who monopolized meetings with his endless monologues. It wasn't until David overheard his coworkers' frustration that he realized the impact of his behavior. This chapter reminded me of the power of empathy in conversations. Truly listening, rather than waiting for your turn to speak, can transform relationships. One of the biggest takeaways from this section is the idea that self-awareness is the foundation of change. Golston constantly brings us back to the importance of examining our habits and understanding where they come from. He explains that many of our self-defeating behaviors are rooted in childhood experiences, whether it's a fear of failure, a need for control, or a desire for approval. By acknowledging these roots, we can begin to rewrite the stories we tell ourselves. What I found especially powerful was his discussion of fear of failure, fear of rejection, fear of change. Golston doesn't shy away from the fact that fear is a driving force behind many of our actions or inactions. But he also reminds us that fear, when faced head-on, loses its power. This perspective made me rethink some of the fears that have held me back in my own life. Throughout this section, Golston's tone is both compassionate and firm. He doesn't sugarcoat the realities of self-sabotage, but he also offers hope and practical solutions. His blend of storytelling, actionable advice, and psychological insights makes the book feel like a conversation with a wise mentor, someone who genuinely wants to see you succeed. What I appreciated most was how this section challenged me to reflect on my own behaviors. I found myself thinking about times I'd avoided conflict, resisted change, or tried to do everything myself. Goulston's insights helped me see these patterns in a new light, not as failures, but as opportunities for growth. This part of the book also reinforced the importance of small, consistent steps. Whether it's learning to delegate, practicing active listening, or resisting the urge to react defensively, change doesn't happen overnight. But with patience and persistence, it's possible to get out of your own way and create a more fulfilling, successful career. As we move into the final part of Get Out of Your Own Way at Work, Mark Goulston takes us through some of the most deeply ingrained self-defeating behaviors that hold us back, ones that aren't always obvious but can be just as destructive. This section of the book really struck a chord with me because it challenges us to confront the fears and habits we may not even realize are guiding our actions. One of the key behaviors Goulston addresses is the fear of failure. This is a big one. Who hasn't hesitated to take a risk or try something new because of that little voice in the back of their mind whispering, "What if you fail?" Goulston points out that this fear often stems from childhood experiences, like being criticized for making mistakes. Over time, we internalize the idea that failure is something to be avoided at all costs. What I found especially insightful here was Goulston's reminder that failure is a natural part of growth. He shares the story of a marketing executive who was so afraid of making the wrong decision that she became paralyzed, unable to move projects forward. This fear not only stalled her career but also created frustration among her team. What turned things around for her was a mindset shift, seeing failure as a learning opportunity rather than a reflection of her worth. This reminded me of a time I hesitated to pitch an idea at work because I was worried it might not be perfect. Looking back, I realize how much time I wasted second-guessing myself, when I could have been iterating and improving. Goulston's advice to reframe failure as feedback resonated deeply. It's a perspective that can truly change the way we approach challenges. Another behavior that stood out in this section is the habit of setting expectations too low. Goulston explains that this often stems from a fear of disappointment. If we don't aim too high, we can't fail too hard. But the problem is, when we limit our expectations, we limit our potential. This chapter was a wake-up call for me because it made me think about all the times I've settled for good enough instead of striving for something truly great. Goulston also dives into the dangers of people-pleasing. While being agreeable and accommodating might seem like a positive trait, it can quickly become a self-sabotaging habit when taken too far. The author tells the story of a manager who bent over backward to make everyone happy, to the point where she lost sight of her own needs and goals. This not only led to burnout but also caused her team to lose respect for her because they saw her as someone who couldn't make tough decisions. This chapter made me think about how often we say yes to things out of guilt or a desire to be liked, even when it's not in our best interest. Goulston's advice here is empowering. Learn to say no, set boundaries, and remember that you can't pour from an empty cup. It's a reminder that prioritizing your own needs isn't selfish. It's necessary for long-term success. One of the most powerful parts of this section is Goulston's discussion on not forgiving. Holding on to grudges, he explains, doesn't hurt the person we're angry with, it hurts us. He shares the story of a man who couldn't move past a betrayal at work, and that resentment consumed him, affecting his relationships and his ability to focus. It wasn't until he forgave, not to absolve the other person, but to free himself, that he was able to move forward. I found this particularly moving because it's such a universal struggle. We've all been hurt by someone, and the idea of forgiving can feel impossible. But Goulston frames forgiveness not as a gift to the other person, but as a gift to ourselves. That shift in perspective was profound for me. It made me think about the grudges I've held onto, and how much lighter I'd feel if I let them go. As the book comes to a close, Goulston emphasizes the importance of self-reflection and accountability. He encourages readers to take stock of their behaviors, identify patterns, and commit to making changes. What I appreciated most about this part was its hopeful tone. Goulston doesn't expect us to be perfect, but he does challenge us to be better, to take ownership of our actions and strive for growth. One of the final stories he shares is about a CEO who struggled with impulsiveness. His tendency to make snap decisions without consulting his team created a toxic work environment and led to costly mistakes. But through coaching and self-awareness, he learned to pause, seek input, and approach decisions with more thoughtfulness. This transformation didn't happen overnight, but it did happen, and it was a powerful reminder that change is always possible. What struck me most about this section was how actionable Goldstein's advice is. For example, when addressing impulsiveness, he suggests creating a pause button, a moment to step back and ask yourself, is this the right decision? Have I considered all the factors? It's such a simple concept, but it can make a huge difference in how we approach our choices. As I finished this section, I found myself reflecting on how much I've learned from this book. Goldstein's insights have not only helped me understand my own behavior, but also given me practical tools to improve. One of the biggest takeaways for me is the idea that self-defeating behaviors aren't fixed. They're habits we can change with awareness and effort. Overall, the final part of Get Out of Your Own Way at Work is a powerful reminder that while we all have flaws and fears, we also have the ability to overcome them. Goldstein's blend of storytelling, empathy, and practical advice makes this book a must-read for anyone looking to grow, both personally and professionally. Wrapping up this journey through Get Out of Your Own Way at Work, I can't help but reflect on how much this book offers, not just for our professional lives but for our personal growth as well. Mark Goldstein doesn't just hand us a list of do's and don'ts. He holds up a mirror and asks us to take a good, honest look at ourselves. And that's not always easy, is it? But here's the thing. The process of self-awareness and change is worth it. What really stayed with me was the recurring theme that most of our struggles at work aren't about our skills or the people around us. They're about the stories we tell ourselves. Stories about what we're capable of, what others think of us, or what we have to do to succeed. Goldstein challenges us to rewrite those stories, to let go of the habits that hold us back, and to step into the best versions of ourselves. I think the most inspiring part of this book is the reminder that change is always possible. It doesn't matter how long you've been stuck in a pattern or how deeply rooted your fears are, there's a way forward. It starts with awareness, with courage, and sometimes with the simple decision to try again. As I read, I found myself thinking about the people in my life who could benefit from these lessons, colleagues, friends, even family members. But more importantly, I kept coming back to my own journey. What are the behaviors I need to work on? Where have I been holding myself back? And how can I start taking small, meaningful steps to move forward? I hope this summary has sparked similar reflections for you. If you're like me, you might feel a mix of emotions right now. Hope, motivation, maybe even a little discomfort as you recognize some of your own habits in the examples we've explored. That's a good thing. It means you're already on the path to growth. So here's my challenge to you. Take one idea from this book, just one, and put it into practice this week. Maybe it's learning to say no when you need to, or pausing before reacting defensively, or finally tackling that project you've been putting off. Whatever it is, commit to it and see how it feels. And while you're at it, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Did any of the stories or insights from this book resonate with you? Are there self-defeating behaviors you've noticed in yourself that you're ready to change? Share your reflections in the comments. I'd love to keep the conversation going and hear your perspective. If you enjoyed this summary and want to dive deeper into other transformative books, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Your support means so much, and it helps us continue creating content that inspires and empowers. As we part ways for now, I want to leave you with one final thought from Goldstein's book. Potential is a terrible thing to waste. You have so much to offer, so much you're capable of. Don't let fear, doubt, or old habits keep you from stepping into your full potential. The path forward isn't always easy, but it's always worth it. Until next time, keep growing, keep challenging yourself, and remember, you're never as stuck as you think you are. Take care, and I'll see you in the next video.